Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece. Episodes, here's the trick, 371, 372, and 373. The Straw Hat crew gets wiped out. The Shadow's powers in full swing. The incredible battle starts. Luffy versus Luffy. And the end of the battle is nigh. Pound in the finishing move. In these episodes, we get to see Luffy fight himself, and it goes down in a very different way than I had imagined, and it's not over yet, because Moria is fine and just leveling up now. I hate this for us. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to the Straw Hat crew, the One Piece crew, for commissioning this episode. I just want to, mention something. So, Florian got in touch with me on Discord on Messenger. And what had usually happened with covering this show, when you book it in a normal way, you usually type in the episode number you want into the booking, and I read that and I go with it. But because so many things get booked so far ahead for One Piece, and because there's a lot of wannabes mixed in there, the people who do the commissions will usually just book a batch of episodes and then decide after how many I should watch per episode and figure out where the wannabes will fit in based on that. And because I don't know how many people remember, but a few episodes back, maybe 5, I thought I had skipped something, or I didn't have enough time to finish talking about it. And then it turned out I really had talked about it pretty much. But when I thought that I was going to need to cover that episode in the next recording, Gabby very kindly reached out with a spreadsheet of the change that she had made to what I would cover in order to accommodate fitting that episode into a recording on top of the ones that I already had booked. And then it turned out it was fine. I didn't even need to worry about it. But this dodo bird here, she still saved that spreadsheet from Gabby, which I guess it turns out, and I didn't even think about it, but Florian normally would send me one, and he hadn't. So I just didn't think about the fact that this was made for a situation that we didn't have to worry about in the end. So I've been watching the wrong number of, or not the wrong number of episodes, but I've been watching the wrong episodes per recording, and I am behind where I should be at this point by 1. I watched 3, and last time I said that I was mystified because every time that I was trying to play 368, it was playing the episode before it, and I was very confused. But it was because I was looking at the spreadsheet and but I watched this episode already. Anyway, you guys, there was all this confusion. I am going to be covering in a different order than was given to me still, just to make up for it, because there's a wannabe coming, and I have to make sure things still fall within the same timing in order to make sure that I'm watching the right one for the wannabe. So everybody listening to this, probably they don't care and they're just following along, but I just want you guys to know, if you're listening and you're wondering why the rhythm is off a little bit, maybe, or if you're somebody who helped decide what episodes and you're she's covering the wrong ones, that's what's going on. I got the official spreadsheet from Florian for the next few. So I'm covering 3 this time, which was what was expected, but it's the wrong 3. I was supposed to watch 1 episode further, and I did consider watching 4, but I could not fit them all once I saw like what was going on. So I am doing 374, 375, and 376 next time. And then 377, 378, 379 the time after that in order to do the wannabe with Trish. So there had been one episode that was supposed to be only 2. I'm going to be filling 3 in for that. I'm very sorry about all this business at the top. If you don't care about this or you're not involved or don't, have any particular stake in it. Anyway, but I just apologies for getting that mixed up. And I feel like okay with the fact that I am in the rhythm I am, though, because honestly, this section ending with the scene with Moria pulling all of the shadows toward him, that felt like a really nice stopping point for this grouping of episodes. Like, and I don't know if maybe later I'll see, it was grouped this other way because of reasons, but I kind of felt like it seemed like the end of one regular television episode, because these episodes are so short, right? They're like 15, 20 minutes, and they often feel like, it makes sense that it's based on a manga, because reading comics, it's a similar thing where an issue is not a chapter. A volume feels like a chapter. An issue feels like you get just barely a taste of the start of a chapter and it's already over. So that's sort of how I feel like these episodes are a lot of the time. It's like you just barely get some movement, and watching multiples at a time works really well because of that. So anyway, oh my God. Seraphim is in the chat saying, Moria is a cockroach. He refuses to just die. And honestly, I know you guys have said that his shape is based on a shallot, I think. Luffy calls him an onion, but I think you guys have mentioned it's a shallot. And he kind of, he's not cockroach shaped. Like, there is a little bit of that in there. Real big roundy body with skinny appendages. Bernadette, I hate him so much. Yeah, he really sucks. Like, I will still stand by. Spandam is the villain that I truly hated in, like, I hated him in the way that you would hate a real person, and, we had that other guy way back when who I hated because he was just the most, like, boring, stupid, bad villain. I think Moria is the most impressive villain. Like, Crocodile had a really cool ability, was super competent, and organized. And so I love that about him. You guys know, I was a big fan of Crocodile as a villain, especially because he was sort of like a new flavor. We had been really fighting against a lot of, like, I'm powerful, but I sort of am accidentally powerful because I have a devil fruit power and not because I'm smart or deserve to be in the position I'm in. And Crocodile finally shows up, and he's somebody who you're like, oh, I see. No, this is somebody who has power because they have, a devil fruit power, but they also know how to leverage everything and, create an organization that, like, supports that. And so I feel like he was the start of a new phase of villains in a lot of ways. Moria, his power is so much more like, no, I don't feel like anybody else's power that we have seen, and I may be wrong about this, has ever been able to affect groups of people at the same time the way that he is. I think the closest that we have the thing with Crocodile where he can make a sandstorm that I guess would, like, desiccate people. But Moria, it's not just that he's killing folks. He is taking their power for himself. that is so much worse. Like, it's bad enough if you can just level a population, but to level them because you are using it to level yourself up, I mean, that's really, really intimidating. And I just truly enjoy seeing this, like, this situation where Moria starts taking all the shadows out of all of his fucking people around. He even takes the shadow out of Winry? No. Sindri? God, you guys, I'm really bad with her name. But I think isn't Winry a character from Full Metal Alchemist? I think that's what I'm thinking of. But I will be honest, y'all, I am seeing Luffy fighting stuffed chock full of shadows. It doesn't even occur to me that Moria can also do that. Never entered my mind at all, which I feel really, really stupid for. I just was like, oh, wow, look at our dudes who've lost their shadows have come up with a really cool hack. Like, genuinely was just thinking they figured out their thing. And it's like, no, Moria's perfectly aware of the many possibilities within his own ability. What are you talking about? So when he started to pull them, I was like, oh, and it's not just that he's taking the shadows out of all of his zombies. He also, obviously, I said already, he takes Chimney's another character. But he takes the shadows of Zoro and Sanji out of those zombies as well, which there's something extremely offensive about. It was already awful that he stole their shadows and put them in zombies that are like obedient to him. Like, that already sucked. But now he is taking those shadows directly into himself, and that is extra terrible. And by the end of this section, he also snatched up Robin's shadow, which I really didn't see that coming either. I thought, and I don't know where I got this from, because there's no real evidence that, other than like the way my mind works, to support what I had assumed. But I thought the only way to take somebody's shadow was within the workshop, the lab that Hogback had set up. I didn't even, like, of course that's not all. It's his power. Like, a devil fruit power isn't limited to a certain tool shop. You can just do it because you have the ability. And maybe sometimes you need a specific, like, element at your disposal. Like, what was it Mr. 2 did? Or no, Mr. 3 with wax. Did he make the wax out of his own body, guys? Remind me how gross that was. I can't remember on like a level of 1 to 10 how gross that was. But anyway, I just, for some reason, kept thinking about the removal of the shadow as being like part of the scientific experiments that Hogback was doing. And it's not a part of that. The zombies are that. But the shadow part was Moria and just his ability. And Hogback is teaming up to figure out a way to use those shadows in a different way. So I was standing there watching her just get her shadow ripped out in the middle of like this courtyard where they're battling, thinking like, no, you can't do that here. like that's really not, that's against the rules, I thought. Nope, it's not. It's just not. So anyway, it's just really funny to me sometimes, you guys, when I step back and look at the way I respond to certain things or the way I think about certain things. And there is a real predictability to my like reading of a situation and how my brain tries to organize and compartmentalize things. And the fact that I'm just like, well, this removal of a shadow is basically a surgical procedure, which means, of course, that we need to be in like an operating room for it. Of course I would do that. Like, Bernadette's in the chat. Oh, wait. First, Seraphim says, oh, yeah, Spannum is a piece of shit. Moria is just an annoying troll who lucked into an OP power. Bernadette says, yeah, Spannum is so bad because we all know a guy like this. Yeah. Don Krieg, that's his name, is bad because he is the cookie cutter villain. Yep. And Moria is bad because he is just so annoying. And Crocodile is just so hot. Competence is just so good. Amen, sister. Also, his looks and style don't help. I love Bernadette used the emoji of the monkey covering its eyes. And I really need to get on using that emoji more because that's adorable. And I forget about it. I don't use like the cat or monkey emojis very much. I need to do that. Seraphim says, do you think Moria's powers have the most lingering effects on multiple people that aren't just you die of any we've seen? It came from him, wasn't part of him. Oh, the wax. Gotcha. Yeah. And the fact that like it can basically, it can end up killing you. Yeah. But that's not his goal with it. It would be better for him to keep you alive, actually. That also adds an element of like real horror to this. And I know that that's added so that there's an out for our friends. Like the whole, the taking of the shadows, if it were just, oh, he does this and it kills you, and that's like the end of the story, and now he has your power and your body is worthless, that would still be pretty unnerving anyway. But I feel like in order to have some of the Straw Hats go through this, you have to have an out. So making sure that like, oh, the shadow can go back to you because you need to still be alive, that's a good out. But it adds like, if intentionally or not, a real like awful element of, and in the meantime, if you can't get it back, you just get to watch this maniac use your power and your shadow for his own ends, and you are powerless to stop him from it, and you are like potentially going to help him do this to other people. It's like capitalism, honestly. Like somebody is just completely draining you of joy, and they're taking away your ability to like be in sunlight and enjoy daytime. All you do is like see the dark, and they get to enrich themselves by it and use that to further subjugate and oppress other people. So anyway, Moria is capitalism. You heard it here first. Bernadette says Mr. 3 made wax from his body like Captain Smoker makes smoke from his body and Ace fire, right? Seraphim says, not really. Smoker and Ace flat out become those things. Mr. 3 can only create wax, but his body never becomes wax. That's true. It's also funny though, like Captain Smoker, he can become smoke, but he also does have like a bunch of cigars that I think it's supposed to be that he just likes smoking cigars, but also it's very handy. But okay, so yeah, I couldn't remember how the wax thing with Mr. 3 worked, if he had to like have wax with him to make it work, but no, it's just that he makes it. So anyway, I just really, I wanted to start off by like telling you guys about the way I reacted to certain elements of this, because I really was taken aback at some of the direction that things went, which should have been honestly kind of predictable. I was caught off guard. So we have this whole thing, you guys. I am looking at this. I told you all last episode how Funimation is playing the wrong one when I go to play an episode. It's doing it again. I had thought that maybe I was mistaken and that it was a mix up because of, watching the wrong ones from the spreadsheet. But no, I'm trying to play 371 and it's playing the one after. why is it like this? Why does it hate me? I feel like it's personal at this point. So, okay. Yep. Here we go. I think it's playing the right one finally. But yeah, so this whole bit here, the Straw Hat crew gets wiped out. This one is pretty painful because it is what it says it is. It is watching each one of our friends go up against Oars and get slapped down in a way that's like, they really brought their all to the fight. It's not just, oh, they, underestimated Oars and they got beaten because they were sort of thinking that this thing, you know what I mean? Like, and they had something in their back pocket, but they didn't use it. Everybody's kind of going all out and it's not having any effect at all. It's really bumming me out. Like, this is a tough thing to watch, honestly. And when they all realize at the end of 370 that he can stretch the way that Luffy could now, they all realize, like, we were fighting this guy before he had devil root powers. And now he's got them. And if we were losing before, we're only going to lose worse now. Like, this is just a complete, this is it. That's a wrap. So we get an explanation from Moria. You guys, I am going to call bullshit on this, and I accept it for the sake of the show. But he's talking about Shadow Revolution, right? Which is like his sort of name for the way that the shadow they can begin to use the devil fruit power of the shadow owner. And I want to like find the actual monologue where he explains this, because the way it's explained is so strange, and it's in response to, by the way, what I can only call like the most intense headbutt of all time. Oars leaps hundreds of feet into the air and he bashes his head toward the ground by stretching his neck out really far. It is crazy looking. And he is just having a grand old time. He loves stretching. This is making it so much more fun. It's really like, the vibe isn't even that he's fighting them. The vibe is that he is just playing with his new toy, and it just happens that they're there and are in the way. It doesn't feel like he's actually attempting to hurt anybody at first. It's just him going, oh, look what I can do. And it just so happens that he's got like blades in each hand sort of thing. But so yeah, everybody is like really freaked out by this new development. And Moria is explaining a shadow is like attached to the body that casts it, mimicking it like a reflection. The body and shadow are physically fused to the same shapes and movements. It's a basic law of nature. But I've freed Oars' shadow from the dominance of Oars' body and taken control of its form with my own shadow. I can now change the shape of Oars' shadow as I wish, thereby forcing Oars' body to match and follow its every contortion. So basically what he's saying is, I'm going to do it in reverse. Normally what happens is that if you are a body, the shadow mimics what you do. But I'm going to do it so that the body mimics what the shadow does. And the shadow is no longer subordinate. The body is subordinate. And he gives them an example and has Oars turn into a sphere. And basically, the thing with, like, I can stretch now, oh, my powers are back. Not exactly. The shadow is allowing him to stretch, but the stretch thing is, like, happening because I think Moria's shadow hears him say gum gum blank and is like, oh, okay, I'm assuming that's sort of like this. And then he does the thing, which doesn't feel like it totally makes sense. The thing for me is, like, I can accept this reversal of the shadow being dominant over the body instead. I think that's actually kind of a neat idea. But the fact that so far all of the things that he has done have sort of matched what Luffy can do, instead of it just being like weird random shapes and that the shadow's making that he's copying. I am wondering how that wasn't something that Oars noticed. Like, how is the shadow reading his mind? Is Moria's shadow reading his mind and going, okay, so he is planning to do this. So because you would think, like, if the shadow is moving independent of Oars and thus making Oars do things that he wouldn't ordinarily do, I would think that Oars would kind of be like, hey, what's happening? Why am I turning into a sphere now, for example? But maybe it's supposed to be that, like, the change in dominance of the shadow instead of the body being the one that controls things is, like, for accepted mentally by Oars in a way that it wouldn't be otherwise, because he is a zombie already, and so he just does what he's told and doesn't really notice, you know? But anyway, this whole thing is just sort of a weird, it's like, I thought that he had gained Luffy's devil fruit powers, as did everybody else. And that's not what's happening here, but it looks like that's what's happening here. It almost feels like Moria was just going, I'm just going to trick all of them into thinking that, and then explain the way it really works. And honestly, I feel like doing something that's completely outside of Luffy's powers would be more alarming. You know, if you were like expecting him to be stretchy, for example, and instead he changes shape into something completely different, wouldn't you be like, wait, what? Well, now we don't know what he's capable of, because I was thinking of things in terms of Luffy's powers, and this doesn't fall into that category at all. So anyway, there's just the moment where he turns Oars into a ball and then rolls forward like it's a Indiana Jones scene and just begins, like, following them. That shit is so goofy, you guys. It doesn't really go anywhere. Like, he rolls forward, but it's only almost like one roll forward before Oars says, hey man, look, I know you're my master and everything, but I just feel like I should be the one sort of in charge of how I fight. You know, it would be cool if you sort of let go of the reins for a second and just let me do what I do. I thought Oars, like, I was expecting fully that Moria was going to reply to him, go fuck yourself, you're mine, you're going to do what I say. He doesn't. He apologizes to Oars for interfering and says, like, that he'll just focus on assisting. I don't know why, you guys. That tickled me no end. Like, he is out here just bragging about how he runs shit and everything is his and he has total control. And then this creature is like, or what if you didn't have total control and you just let me do things? And immediately Moria is like, you know what? All right, sure, I can do that. And backs off. I just really appreciated that. There's something about like him trusting Oars in that moment and being like, I'm gonna I'm going to trust that this enormous creature that has been fighting these guys since before I got here, honestly, will probably pull this out. It does still beg the question, though, for me, how... Because he's talking about assisting, but the shadow, I'm assuming, is still, like, determining things. So I don't really get how exactly this works. But anyway... I think I mentioned already that Nami had showed up at the last episode. And at this point, I did find this really funny because y'all know last time I was talking about how a lot of times Luffy getting sidelined the way he does, it can be kind of frustrating and boring to watch. And in this, Nami is like, where is Luffy? And Usopp says he basically got tricked and so he's fucking somewhere, but we don't know where. And Nami is like, are you serious? Is he going to do something stupid every time? And I was like, oh, we're just going to talk about it like in the text. It's no longer, okay, sure. But when she realizes that what they've got to do is not only beat this zombie, but also beat Moria before the sun comes up, because they're on a fucking deadline at this point. That really sends her into a bit of a state. She's like, are you kidding me right now? And Brooke chimes in here and is like, I have a plan if you'll let me do it. Everybody around him is sort of like, I am not 100% sure that this is going to work, but I guess we don't really have another choice. And Nami straight up is like, I'll do it, but I don't want to get blamed if it doesn't work, which I did find kind of funny. So Brooke climbs into that like giant slingshot and Usopp is pulling him back while Nami is creating a cloud of like lightning, it looks like, in front of him. And Robin has one of her extra long, hands wrapped around Brooks's entire body, like his torso. It's such a weird setup. I don't know how many of you had sort of figured out what we were doing here, but I really, really did not. So what happens is that he's got his cane, or his sword cane, and he is spinning like a helicopter blade, sort of, through the cloud of lightning. And he says, I'm like an arrow forged with lightning, and calls out lightning bone sword as he strikes Oars. And he gets him sort of like in the armpit. You guys, I cannot emphasize enough in this particular fight how impressive so many of these attacks are and how little of an effect they have. It's really upsetting. Like, this is a huge setup, and he's flying through the air through a cloud of lightning, getting lit up like a fucking Vegas street sign. And he goes through the guy's armpit. Like, that's not nothing. Except it is basically nothing. Like, Oars is just like, oh, I've got a hole in me now. Does he fall or even stagger? Like, not really. And then Zoro jumps in. And he's saying two sword style, and I don't remember the name of the technique. It's something like a ladder. And he is heading for Oars, who is a little distracted on trying to get back at Brooke. And he puts his entire foot through the building that Brooke landed headfirst in, because Brooke's like sticking out of this wall like a Looney Tunes character. Anyway, so he stomps on him. It seems totally ignores the attack from Zoro, and then Usopp fires something at him with the slingshot, and I really thought it was going to turn out to be the salt. It is not, but that isn't far behind. That's coming up pretty quickly. So this is when Oars looks at him and says bazooka, and Usopp turns and is like, all right, well, I'm out of here. It's a weird moment because as Usopp is running away, he panics because he hears the bazooka, right? He knows what that means. He's seen Luffy use this before. And yet, when Oars reaches out, his arms do not stretch. And he's looking at them like, wait, what's going on? And then we see that Robin has managed to get inside of Oars's body where Moria is like controlling things. And she is using her arms to put him in a sort of chokehold and is telling him to back off and give it up. I really thought, again, oh, that's a really smart tactic, actually. Go after the dude who's like in control. Well, it's not great, guys, because this is what ends up leading to Robin losing her shadow. So the bats come for her, the weird bats. And she starts using, I think she says viente fleurs. It's the one where she's making like windmills of her arms. I'll be honest with y'all. This felt like an attack that she should have really been able to dodge. If not her, at least like Zoro would have been able to do something. That was what bothered me, I think, a little bit about this, was that when the shadow bats start coming at her, he calls them brick bats, and I'm not really sure why. They're like, I don't understand that name, but as they start coming at her, I was thinking like she would do her thing with these sort of windmills, and then anybody else might step in. What I was sort of hoping was that Nami would use the climate attack and make like a cloud and somehow electrocute them. Now, it's not totally clear to me how these shadows work, but I'm pretty sure, because we've seen that Luffy can punch them, that they are, despite being of shadow, they are like corporeal, right? There's a touchable body there. So can you electrocute them? Because a big sort of cloud-like attack back would be pretty effective, I think. But anyway, it's just Robin trying to defend herself by herself. And these things like the windmill attack, the windmill defense, felt pretty sad. I don't know. I really feel like she could do better. I don't know if she, because they're shadow, again, it's really hard to know. But can she make arms appear out of the bats themselves? Like, is that a thing? I have to assume it's not possible. But, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, she goes down here and Sanji gets really, really pissed. And he begins to go in on these bats and is like kicking the hell out of them. Again, I just want to point out that what she did had so little effect, but him going in and kicking them does something, you know? It's not like permanent. They obviously are able to like get out and reform very quickly. But it just sort of bugged me that for the sake of this moment, this attack is made to seem more intensely like difficult to cope with than I really think it should have been, considering what we have seen Robin do in the past. Sorry. Seraphim in the chat says, Moria is very certainly drama queen enough to want to just freak the crew out, and Oars is not exactly the best at self-reflection. Good question here. Is this something he could do on a person, or would this kill an actual person and Oars only survives because zombie? Yeah, that was also part of what I found weird, was that, and when I said I'm going to call bullshit on this, that was my main thing, was that the whole reason the gum gum fruit works on Luffy is because it turns his body into rubber. That doesn't happen to Oars. He isn't made of a different actual material. So the fact that his body can turn into these shapes, really, if you stop and think about that at all, doesn't make any sense. And this is the only thing about the show that I can get hung up on sometimes, is that there will be like pretty specific cut and dried rules about certain things that seem like they're taking the way magic, for lack of a better word, works in this universe somewhat seriously. And they're trying to apply rules to things in order to create plots around working within those rules. And then there are times where a factor that I would consider pretty important, that up to now the rules have seemed to be concerned about, it will just be completely thrown out the window because we want to do a cool thing. And I understand that, like, I don't need to get hung up on this particularly. Like, it's not something that is ultimately that important, actually. But it's just the fact that because Luffy is actually made of rubber, there are so many things about the way that he fights that are very specific to being, like, actually formed from something that is not regular human body. It's not human flesh anymore, you know? That is brought up a lot. And it's actually even brought up when he asks, I think, Brooke to, like, chuck him. I can't remember who it is, but he's like, are you going to be okay? And Luffy says, I'm made of rubber. I'll be fine. So the fact that he specifically even says that within this section, and Oars, even if he is a zombie and could withstand being manipulated into certain positions, that's not the same thing as, like, literally being able to stretch a body part and then have it snap back to its normal size. It's just, I'm kind of wondering if it's supposed to be that because the Shadow is in charge now, that has altered fundamentally, like, what the body is made of or how it thinks it works. I don't know. It doesn't really matter, but it's just, that was the thing that kind of, because you guys know I really theorized for a minute when we weren't sure yet, we hadn't seen. I was really wondering whether Oars was going to have devil fruit powers, and I came down on no, he definitely won't. And he doesn't. It's not actually the devil fruit powers kicking in. It's Moria's shadow controlling him, granted. But the way he's controlling him should not physically be possible and his body still be, like, functional. Because if he gets stretched out like that, he should just stay that way. You know, like, that would be kind of funny, honestly, if the Shadow, like, stretched his arm out in one direction and then the arm just sort of came crashing to the earth, and it turns out, like, well, you can stretch the flesh out, but it doesn't just snap back into place where it was. Seraphim says Brickbat is using the actual Japanese name of the attack, Brikubato, rather than the translating fragment bats. Okay. Seraphim says, yeah, Oda does like occasionally making things just run on tune logic of it's, if it seems like it would work if you don't think about it. Yeah. And that's like, because I have been trying to really go with that attitude, I don't really mind it in a real sense, but I can't help but notice it because every now and then the show will bust out with some sort of like rule or principle about how things work that feels like, oh, okay, I didn't know we were going to take this so seriously. I didn't know that we were going to be like real about this. And I enjoy it. And then it will sort of pull the rug out from under me. So I can never really tell how things are going to shake out because I don't know how much we're really following the rules at any given time. And to a degree, I'll be honest, that's what makes the show fun, is that you genuinely don't know what he's going to do. It's a different way of like appreciating something than a magical system that was, I was going to say a magical system by like Brando Sando, but even his magical systems, like they have very specific rules, but then he will bust something out that completely upends all of that and is like, psych, that's not actually, only the people who don't know better think that's how it works. So even within that though, there still is a sense of like, I could sort of guess that you could do this and that. And One Piece, it's like, I would guess if we're going to follow the principles, you could do this and that, but it also may just fucking have nothing to do with that at all. And he just does whatever he wants. And, you know, it can get a little frustrating, but I'm not like, I don't hate it. Oh, I'm sorry guys. That's my dog. He's in here as usual. It should only be like another probably week, I think. And then he's, I believe, gonna be healed up enough that he won't have to be inside with me all the time, which I'm pretty excited about. He is healing really fast. But anyway, so this whole thing with the confrontation with Robin, like I said, him taking her shadow, I just did not see it coming. There's this long drawn out moment after he has pulled her shadow out that the scissors are sort of like hovering. And I thought that we were going to have somebody jump in. Something was going to happen to save Robin from getting her shadow cut at the very last second. That I was so sure that the scissors hovering and the way everything sort of slowed down was meant to draw out the moment in order to allow her to be rescued. And that is not how that goes at all. First of all, she like kind of cracks Moria backwards, and you see it in silhouette when she's got her arms still around him while he's inside of Oars. So she does this, and everybody is sort of like, oh, sweet, she did it. She killed him. Like, of course she didn't. I had no belief that she did, but I thought I would have done something. Then we hear him laughing, and she turns around and sees his actual head on his shadow body, which, again, I do not understand how that's allowed. And he says, you almost got me, but not quite in time. I can switch places with my doppelman here whenever I see fit. So when she cracked him backward, that was his shadow. So now the one inside Oars' stomach is the shadow. I truly, this is super, super rude. Like, what the fuck? And then Moria has to go an extra step, you guys. And he says to Robin, your cute little arm parlor tricks don't have any effect on him. And, the patronizing, ew. So yeah, like I said, he's got Robin's shadow. The scissors are coming at her. I'm fully expecting a rescue. And it just goes so slow, you guys. I'm waiting. I'm like, who's going to do what? Because we have all of her friends watching this happen. Nobody steps in. Once again, like, you know, come on, guys. What are you doing? And when they close and her shadow really was taken, I know that they can come back from this. I know this isn't like her being killed, but it's still really awful, you know? I don't want this for anybody, even if you can get out of it in the end. So Moria is like, well, I don't have a corpse to stuff you into, so I'm just going to hang on to you. And then, you know, we find out later one of the things that he can do. Pulling them all into himself the way that Luffy had. So, of course, then we get the assault from Sanji because he's so angry at what Moria did. Yet another attack that looks really badass and like it should have done everything but doesn't really work because he just switches places again. So you see his like weird disembodied head with like the shadow coming out of the bottom flying through the air. Ew, like just really unreasonable. And then we have this sort of interesting moment with Chopper. So Chopper is theorizing about what killed Oars and says, I think that he froze to death. And I think that he was naked when he froze to death on top of everything, which I thought it was funny because they all yell how much of an idiot this person must have been to be out in the freezing cold naked. But that's actually a symptom of hypothermia. For those who aren't aware, is like right before you start to actually shut down, your body's like sensory processing gets fucked up and you go from freezing cold to suddenly feeling like you are sweltering and strip off all of your clothes trying to cool down. It's a really wild thing. And I don't like there's just something about knowing that our bodies can short circuit in that sort of way that's extremely unsettling. But anyway, I'm just thinking that maybe this creature didn't start off naked and got hypothermic and stripped off his clothes because he suddenly got really hot. Maybe it's a perfectly logical thing. So then we have the bit where Chopper like uses a rumble ball. He makes like these really huge round arms. It's not even like muscle. I mean, it is supposed to be muscle, but they're not muscle shaped. It's like two spheres, you know? And he keeps hitting in the same spot. And Oars says like, you already hit me there. If it didn't work the first time, it's not going to work the second time. You're not accomplishing anything. What are you doing? To which he says, Chopper, just because you can't feel pain doesn't make you strong. Pain is a warning from your body that something is wrong and that you should pay attention. So if you're not feeling it, it doesn't mean there's not damage happening. It's just that you aren't aware of it, which actually might be kind of a problem for you. And it reminded me of in the Dresden Files, there is a point at which he gets an ability from like a deal that he makes, and he is able to lift cars and, you know, things will like, he will get shot, but he won't notice immediately. And at first he just thinks, what a badass ability I've got. And then somebody is like, did you get given a really badass ability? Or did they just strip your body of all the things that let you know you're hurt in order to make you fight longer? And that is just going to come crashing down and completely crush you at some point. And Harry has to stop and be like, oh my God. And even the fact that he's lifting cars, they're like, yeah, well, if you get enough of a surge of adrenaline, you can do amazing things. But that adrenaline wears your body down, which is why it only happens like once per lifetime. And I think the ability they gave you is more that they just took that away. They took that like safeguard away. So now you're just getting adrenaline surges all the fucking time, which is going to completely wear you down and also make you potentially like easier to control in the long run. And he's like, oh, okay, yeah, that actually sounds like it makes a lot more sense than me just getting really awesome powers. Okay, that sucks. So anyway, what I just kept thinking about that with this. But so the final thing that I haven't even gotten like I haven't gotten much into the battle with Nightmare Luffy, but I'll be honest, you guys, I wasn't that excited about the battle itself because it's just a lot of him doing impossible shit and throwing oars around, which is satisfying in that you want Luffy to win, but it's more like it starts because, first of all, I don't dislike Oars. He's got Luffy's weird personality to him, so there's a part of me that's got like a soft spot for him, and I don't like watching him get his ass kicked as much as I know he's supposed to be the bad guy. I just don't enjoy that much. The fight against Moria, now I'm going to be very down for that. But Oars, I just felt kind of sorry for him, Like at one point, he's trying to get up again. They freeze him up with using the climatact and getting him covered in water, and then they freeze him in place, and they manage to take him down so that like bones are broken and stuff, and he's still trying to move, and he's like, well, I don't feel any pain, but I can't move. And there was something so sad about it. And even Chopper is like, man, this really does make a mockery out of life, because he looks like he's alive, but all of the principles of being alive are just not there. And because of that, I just felt pity for him. I didn't even really like see him as an enemy the way that I was meant to. And there's a moment, I was so mad, you guys, where it looks like Usopp has succeeded in shooting a big bag of salt into his mouth, and they play the like music of victory and everything for a minute. It's a real moment of, I knew because of the pause before he says, I did it. I was like, yeah, that doesn't seem like that worked, buddy. I don't know. I got a feeling. So he's cheering himself on and being like, haha, I did it. No problem. And all of a sudden you see Moria's shadow coming out of Oars' mouth. And it turns out that Moria is perfectly aware, of course, about the salt being a weakness. And so he had the shadow in Oars' mouth guarding it so that he could catch the salt before it actually touched his insides, which it's an extremely rude moment. The shadow just comes out holding the bag with a big grin on his face. And it winds up getting chucked and all the salt goes everywhere. And Usopp is so upset, and he's like, Brook literally risked his life for this salt. We can't let it go to waste. And it was heartbreaking, you guys. It really was. The fucking Moria is watching Usopp, like his spirit be crushed, and says, it was so hard not to laugh. This guy really fucking sucks, man. He really does. So anyway, this is when Nightmare Luffy shows up. Everybody else has like one by one been slapped down. And then Nightmare Luffy begins to fight Oars, and we've got the whole crowd of zombies who are watching, cheering Oars on. But then we've also got all of the guys who had their shadows stolen that are watching everything. And they're all cheering in different directions and kind of in awe of what was happening. The way that the like fight winds up going, everybody is just sort of blown away at how effective Luffy is. And I find it extra funny because the guys whose shadows were stolen sent him in there, but then consistently displayed total shock at how much Luffy is kicking ass. And I'm like, look, I get it, guys, that you just had to sort of take a risk and try. But there is something unnerving about the very people who were like, you've got to help us and you've got to try and beat him, then being surprised that you're succeeding. That doesn't feel great, you know? And Luffy does this thing at one point where he's like spun himself up and he's blowing at the ground and sort of makes himself into a kind of rocket so that he's like floating. And then he just starts punching Oars in his middle so that he's also punching Moria. And that like sends Oars backward. And I thought what he was going for was that he was driving Oars to the ocean. that he was trying to get him toward the edge of the ship and get him in the salt water. But he just crashes into a building. It doesn't look like he's anywhere near the edge of things. And so he goes down here. And the next episode is the one where everybody is like, sweet, he won, you know, we're saved. I think that it's Usopp, or it might be Zoro or Sanji. Somebody yells out, essentially, I know you guys are real preoccupied on fucking celebrating, but you don't have your shadows back. You know that, right? And the sun is still coming up. So I don't know why you all are acting like the problem is solved when you're still going to die any second. And somebody is like, oh yeah, I forgot about that in the audience. Meanwhile, like, we have Oars. He gets back up again at one point, but of course all of the Straw Hats also get back up again, which like blows everyone's mind. And then he finally gets taken down for the final time. And the final time is the one where they freeze him up and pull him down, and everybody's sort of using all of their different respective abilities to get it to happen. And so they're like, all right, well, I guess, yeah, we better focus on getting our shadows back. We better do this. And Moria stands up and they're like, motherfucker, give us our shadows back. To which Moria is like, are you kidding me? You just think you tell me and I will do it? That's not how any of this works. I get what the Straw Hat did, by the way, to increase his power, and two can play at that game. And then he begins to pull shadows from everywhere, and eventually I think he reaches a full 1,000, which is really something. Luffy had 100, and he was a maniac. Now, the only thing I can hope is that Moria has the same restriction, which is it's 10 minutes and then they fly out of you. But what would be smart of Moria is to only take 100 and then when they fly out of you, take another 100 more, and then you could last longer. And instead of going overpowered for just 10 minutes, you can go more high powered, not overpowered, for an hour, you know? But anyway, the episode ends with him drawing all of this power into himself. And it genuinely is very scary. Like, he's just laughing hysterically. And a lot of times when bad guys laugh hysterically, you're just like, dude, get a life. None of this is funny. And you're not that far ahead of everyone else. So calm down. But honestly, Moria laughing, I was kind of like, you got me. You did. I didn't think of this. I kind of understand why you're so fucking pleased with yourself. Like, this is a smart move. And I didn't love feeling that way. So anyway, all right, I'm going to wrap this up. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Appreciate you all very, very much. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.